Tamamdır.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel. We are again together with an important subject, which will be revolving around North African issues. So we will have three distinguished, and actually four distinguished, speakers, and the three important topics in this context. And each of these topics will be specifically focusing on the issues which shape the regional dynamics in North African region. And the two of those presentations actually will be concentrating upon the the problems which are emerging between Ethiopia and Egypt, and the dam project. It is about the Nil River actually. So in this context, what I mean is that the two of three presentations will be giving detailed information on what are the motivations behind such a problem, maybe what are the visible and invisible aspects or direct and indirect impacts of this problem over the regional issues. And maybe our speakers will be talking about possible solutions to this problem. So lastly, of course, we have another topic that is about the Hirak movement. Hirak movement is also a critical movement in shaping Algerian domestic and international relations. So one of our speakers will be also elaborating on the maybe certain principles of the Hirak movement, its domestic and the foreign orientation, and maybe its future, and of course after giving information on its previous policies, he will be or she will be giving making some future scenarios about the position and the possible policies of the Hirak movement. So, of course, without further ado, let me give the floor to our first panelists, who is Nigusu Âdem YIMER, and he will be talking about the Ethiopia-Egypt arms race, a pitfall on the regional water diplomacy battle. Let's start with Nigusu. Nigusu is here. Okay, Nigusu is not here yet. So let me then start with our second topic, and that is very critical topic indeed. So I'm sure that Zoulikha and Reem, will be scrutinized on the Hirak movement, and its maybe not clearly known aspects, and maybe its future place in Algerian domestic and the international relations. So please, Zoulikha and Reem, you can start your speech.
Thank you. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, of course.
Okay then. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are based right now. I apologize in advance for any loss in thought during my presentation, my speaking, because it's 2 a.m. in the morning where I'm based in the United States. So my name is Reem Hayat. I'm an investigative journalist serving as a researcher fellow at the International Foundation for Electoral System in Washington, D.C., and I'm presenting with my colleague and friend ALIANE Zoulikha, who is a journalist and PhD student at the Middle East Institute. So first, I would like to thank the Middle East Institute of Sakarya University for this opportunity to take this part of this Congress. It is a great honor for us. So as part of the panel, Society and Politics in North Africa, we will be presenting one of the major events that happened and still happening in our home country, Algeria, for the second consecutive year, which is the social movement called Hirak, and its role in driving a change in the Algerian political and social level. We chose this topic not only because of its significant impact at the national level, but also because of its way in creating a new Algerian reality. So first, I will let Zoulikha guide us through our presentation outline. So it's up to you, Zoulikha. Zoulikha, you're muted.
Can you open your microphone, Zoulikha?
Pardon. Thank you, Reem. I would like to echo Reem's voice in thanking the organizers and the Middle East Institute for this incredible Congress. We will start the presentation by defining the Algerian social movement with name Al-Hirak, stating its causes and characteristics. We will then shed the light on the economics and political situation in Algeria before Hirak, followed by the outcomes and how the Hirak made change on social and political level of our country. And we will finish our presentation with outlining the main gains of the Hirak and its future in continuing in its influence politically and socially. I will give this up to Reem to enlighten us on the Hirak. It's up to you, Reem.
Thank you so much. So, So before getting into the Algerian social movement and what triggered it, and to better understand the idea of the Hirak itself, I would like to walk you through the Algerian political history. So the Hirak that started on February 2019 was not the first protest in the Algerian history. There has been other significant protests over the last 3 decades. So for instance, on October 5th, 1988, Algeria has known an important protest, which results in around 500 deaths. The severe economic situation, the rise in prices, and the product of first conception, and the high level of employment were the main reasons for it. That protest made some crucial changes in the political system. I can mention like the amendment of the constitution that made an end to the one-party system that was there since Algeria independence in 1962, and opened the floor to media for the first time. So a series of violent events that followed that, and Algeria entered into a period that we call the Black Decade, which was 10 years of terrorism that left Algerians in fear of protesting. So there has been other protests as well, like here and there in Algeria, especially in the Kabylie part of the country. And some voices started to rise in 2011 during the Arab Spring. So on February 2019, Algerian broke the wall of fear. And after the announcement of the then President Abdelaziz Bouteflika of his intention to run for a 5th term, a massive wave of weekly protest has emerged all over the country, and as well in Algerians around the world has started to protest around the embassies, the Algerian embassies abroad. So to advocate for a big structural change in the government. So initially, the Algerian protested to demand the resignation of the President Bouteflika, the 82 years president who led the country for 20 years, despite suffering from a stroke in 2013 that left him with a very difficult health condition. So under the pressure of Hirak, the long ruling president has resigned in 2 weeks after the start of the Hirak, and the presidential elections that were supposed to be on the 18th April of last year, 2019, was cancelled. With such a chaotic situation, the head of the army, Gaid Salah, stepped in back then and announced the application of the Article 102 of the Algerian Constitution, which gave the head of the National Assembly the authority to fill in the president's function for 45 days. So as Al-Hirak continued all over Algeria, demanding a radical change, that the resignation of the president is not sufficient. Many of the political, military, security figures were arrested for cases related to corruption, illegal practices, and abuses that damaged the Algerian economy, including the former President younger brother, Zoulikha, along with the previous former Prime Minister, Ahmed Ouyahia, and Abdelmalik Sellal, and the Minister of Trade, Ammar bin Younes. And the election that was going to be held on the 4th of July, 2019, was as well cancelled under the street pressure. A new presidential election was organized for December 12, 2019, basically after 11 months of the start of the Hirak. And even though an election without Bouteflika was one of the Hirak outcomes, like was one of the Hirak products, it was clearly not exactly what they wanted. A division in opinion happened between those who were for the election and those who were opposing it. Overall, the election took place and Abdelmajid Tebboune was elected as a president. So over the year, the Algerian streets were marred with millions of Algerians. Protesters have not gone home, and many vowed to stay until a radical change happens. A radical political change was not the only drive factor of the Hirak, but also the difficult economic situation. The trade balance recorded a massive deficit, and the collapse of oil prices, especially that Algeria is totally dependent actually on oil revenues, and the increase in taxes on many of the first necessity products that the Algerian was pushed actually to speak out loud. So the Algerian social movement does not really fit nor resemble to any of the 2011 social movements that happens around the region, like around the MENA region. It has the title of being the most peaceful, resilient, united, and longest movement in both Algeria and the region in recent history. It gathers all kinds of thinking, ideology, races, old and young people, male and female, and even families with their kids. So despite the expectations otherwise, it has proven itself capable of maintaining both strength and unity. So without further ado, I would give the mic to Zoulikha to continue with the main outcomes, gains, and future of the Hirak.
Thank you, Rim. I will start with the outcomes. The Hirak has made crucial changes in the political and socially. In political change, there are two main political changes. The first is the disintegration of the power, and the second is the split. It is a split within the main and big ruling political parties. For the disintegration of power, a political crisis increased amid the social movement and make three parties. The first party was the regime which was in the government. The second was the person who was in the regime and was excluded by ruling circles. The third category was the people which went out into the streets inside and outside of Algeria and refused to be the part of neither the political parties nor the government. Their aim was to overthrow President Abdelaziz Bouteflika and choose a president through the elections. The main second political outcomes is the split within main and big ruling political parties. In Algeria, there are two big political parties, ALIANE and RND. For the ALIANE was ALIANE National Liberation Front Party. The period that followed the movement was the most difficult period of Liberation Front Party in his history. As the dismissal of the former Secretary General Jamal Abbas and the appointment of a new party coordinator and the promotion of President Bouteflika's fifth term led to restlessness in the ranks of its members. A group of these parties announced their participation in the protest, Hirak, and some members withdrew from the party. The RND is the same fate that the RND party, RND National Republic Democratic Party, has achieved, from which collective leaders have resigned, including those who joined the streets, and some of them joined other parties, and the top of them is the leader of the party, Ahmed Ouyahia, who was submitted his resignation and called the authority to respond to the demand of the protest. The other visible changes in the political side in Algeria is the division with the Algerian Institution Forum and the resignation of the ex-president Ali Haddad, who was the business and close to the ruling regimes of that time. This institution has a great power in Algeria. The fourth factor is the weakness of the political parties within the movement, which tried in various ways to adopt the movement. Coming now to the impact of the Hirak on the social aspect. It has brought people together. The Hirak has brought people together in the beginning in the peaceful manner. Hirak was resilient and it maintained its unity despite many attempts to break it down by using the Amazigh as a tool to divide the Hirak. This is known in Algeria between Arab and Amazigh. This pushed the authority issuing decision preventing any national flag from being carried during the protest. The Hirak filed in choosing a representative in the December 2019 elections. When the election was announced, the opinion among the Hirak was divided between a group was with the election and choose a new president for the Algerian Republic, and others refused the elections, and they wanted to eliminate all the regime. Adding to that, the main change that occurred in the Algerian society as a result of the Hirak was the level of political awareness leveled up. People started organizing political debates, round tables in street, parks, and at universities, debating the current political crisis. The most important gain that the Algerian society get out of the social Hirak is the President Bouteflika resigns, the drop the ban on demonstration in the capital Algiers that was there since 2001. Other main features this movement, its demand, which began and continued with purely political demands, from a rejection of the fifth term, then a refusal to extend the fourth term, to change it the entire political system. This differs radically from the demands that have been driving social protests dedicated in the economic aspect. After the resignation of the President Bouteflika, many Algerian businessmen were imprisoned on charge related to corruption, which led to closure of many factories and the layoff of thousands of workers within affected the social incomes. To conclude, the Hirak has succeeded in bringing political and social changes through its resilience, unity, and persistence. However, some of Hiraks have abused their freedom of expression in violating the freedom of others. For example, preventing people from voting inside and outside of Algeria on December 2018. The Hirak 19. The Hirak is now facing the most challenging period since its beginning. It was divided during and after the election, with a lack of the future vision, along with emerging spatial and ideological differences and lingering inability to evolve into the political force. Additionally, it has stopped because of the coronavirus. The Hirak intends to start a new time through social media after the amendment of the constitution that had brought people together to reject the constitution amendment. So with this, we conclude the presentation and we open your questions.
Thank you, Zoulikha and Rim, for your, detailed presentation on Iraq's achievements and then serious problems, serious divisions it is now probably facing. And of course, if we have any questions, we will be directing all related questions to both. So right now, we will continue with Hasan İLKBAHAR, and he will be also looking at an important topic that affects the regional landscape, and especially the problem, the ongoing and maybe permanent problem that remains. There is no resolution in sight for the near future. Let's listen then Hasan İLKBAHAR and his opinions on this important critical dam project and its impact on the Ethiopian and the Egyptian relations. Yes, Hasan, please.
Thank you, Hocam, and thank you for also Middle East Institute of Sakarya University for this opportunity. Let me just sharing the presentation. Actually, I couldn't. Okay, no problem. I'm going to, as you said, I'm going to talk about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and its impact on the Egyptian-Ethiopian relations. First of all, I want to talk about the content of the presentation. In the first part, I will describe the Nile Basin, which actors, which countries, and how the Nile tributaries affected the region. And then I am talking about the more historical agreements related to the Nile and why the current status quo is in favor of Egypt and currently, and why Ethiopia don't utilize the waters of the Nile right now. And then I'm going to talk about which Ethiopian projects on the Nile during the 20th century. And then I'm talking about the GERD and its impact on the Egyptian-Ethiopian relations. Just a second. Okay. Let's talk about the Nil River Basin. The Nil River has two main tributaries, actually, which one is emerging from the Lake Tana in Ethiopia, which is called Blue Nile, and more than 86% of the resources of the Nile actually emerging from the Ethiopia, and another tributary of the river Nile is emerging from the Lake Victoria, which is also called the White Nile actually, and also the most important characteristic feature of the river Nile is flowing from south to the north and emerging from Uganda and Ethiopia, then Sudan and Egypt. Is very interesting situation, and this is also why the river Nile has a problem, and also today. Let's talk about the historical agreements related to the sharing of the waters of the river Nile. At the end of the 20th century, there were several agreements among the colonizer powers. For example, the Britain, the most importantly Italy and France. Although there are several agreements between these actors, all these actors aim to disregard Ethiopian rights because of these agreements, and they didn't want Ethiopia to construct any irrigation projects over the Blue Nile because of the in case river Nile can easily flow the Sudan and Egypt. And the most important agreement between these actors is actually the 1929 agreement between Britain and Egypt. With this agreement, Egypt actually constructed a status quo which favor of Egypt. For example, how this status quo is working. For example, the 48 million cubic meters for Egypt, only 4 million cubic meters for Sudan. Egypt also guaranteed to right to veto. For example, if any project on Sudan, if any project that Sudan will doing on the river Nile, Egypt has right to veto. It's very, very important situation. And another agreement which construct the current status quo is 1959 agreement. We all know, as an international relations student, 1956 there was a huge crisis among the great powers at that time for the Suez crisis, and also Suez crisis is the result of the river Nile sharing. For example, how to say, as you know, the Jamal Abdel Nasser for the Aswan Haydam, it was a result of this Aswan Haydam crisis. As you know, the Aswan Haydam was financed by the Soviet Union, and later on, the Sudan has get the independence in 1958. For this reason, Sudan started to criticize the 1929 agreement, and they demanded another agreement for Egypt. Then Egypt accepted the situation and Egypt recognized the Sudanese rights. Also, Egypt tried to legitimize the Aswan Haydam for the sake of the guaranteeing the legitimization of that dam. According to this agreement, Egypt 55 million cubic meters guaranteed the waters of the Nile. Sudan only 18.5 million cubic meters guaranteed. And as we know, as we see from these two important agreements which construct the current status quo, there is no Ethiopia actually. And Ethiopian rights are mostly disregarded with this agreement. Later on, when it comes to the 1990s, due to important developments in Ethiopia and another regional countries, all these regional countries criticize the current status quo in the River Nile Basin, and they demanded their rights actually. For this reason, in 1991 and 1993, there were cooperation framework agreements between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. However, although these agreements' main aim is to weaken the 1959 agreement, the Ethiopia was unsuccessful. Later on, the most important development in the River Nile Basin happened in 1999 with the establishing the Nil Basin Initiative. The 11 countries in the Nile Basin actually joined this initiative. However, this is also Egypt's favor, and also did not solve the problems of the River Nile. And then, when it comes to 2010, there was a cooperation framework agreement between the upstream countries. Neither Egypt nor Sudan joined this framework agreement. They started to criticize these agreements. As you know, when it comes to 2010, there was an Arab Spring and huge protests in Egypt. And for this reason, Ethiopia tried to guarantee its rights actually over the river Nile. However, although there were several agreements which disregards the Ethiopia also tried to construct some projects on the river Nile. For example, the Lake Tana project in the early 1930s. However, it was unsuccessful because of the, as you know, the Italian occupation of the Ethiopia. There was another plan which was called the Abbey Master Plan study. It was between the 1958, actually the date of the plan is not coincidence, because as you know, as I said, the Aswan Haydam was financed by the USSR. This project was also proposed by the United States, and we also know how the Cold War affected the river Nile. However, due to several reasons that I will mention about later, this project also failed. And there were also another projects projects by the Ethiopians, such as the Gilgay Abbey project and the Tana Beles development projects. Just a second. Is there any problem? Okay. Okay, let's talk about why these Ethiopian projects were failed on the river Nile. For example, there were several internal and external reasons. For example, lack of sufficient financial resources, lack of institutional capability of the Ethiopians, and also the status quo which was established by Sudanese and Egyptians also affected and also pressured Ethiopia not to construct any irrigation projects or any other great dams. And also Ethiopia did not take international financial aid from the international actors. This was also another reason. But probably our dear next panelist, Nigusu, Mr. Nigusu, will talk about why Ethiopia started such a project and how. But I will not talk about this. Let's talk about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It was a huge master plan, actually, about, for example, consider the Aswan High Dam only produces 2,000 megawatt electricity. Aswan High Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will produce 6,000 megawatt energy, and also it has capacity to hold 74 billion cubic meters. It was a huge master project, and it will be the first great project on the African continent, and in the world it will be the third one. And also in 2020, it was almost completed 70% of the project. As I said, why Ethiopia started to such a great project, the most important reason is the hydroelectric power, to production of the hydroelectric power, because some Ethiopians, about 60% of the Ethiopians still live under the conditions of lack of electricity, and in the villages and some cities, Ethiopia don't want to sustain this situation, and it wanted to put an end. And also the exporting electricity is quite important for Ethiopia, and it may be that it will make Ethiopia to be most important exporter and the biggest energy exporter in African continent. It was a huge important project for this reason. Also, this income helped the country to development of the country. And is there another reason? Also, I want to talk about the site selection. As you know, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was located in nearby the border Sudan, about 20 or 40 kilometers. Why this selection? Because of the minimize the cost effects of the exporting electricity, Sudan and Egypt. When it comes to the Egypt, why Egypt is criticizing these Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam? Because Egypt is the most dependent country to the river Nile. About 90% of the water needs coming from Nile. And Egypt also claimed that after this project constructed, 25% of the water needs will be decreasing for this because of this project. And Egypt also claimed that about 60% of the cultivated areas will be destroyed. For this reason, for mainly actually food and water reason, Egypt claimed that this is an existential threat. Actually, from Jamal Abdel Nasser, in fact, from the Khedive Ismail Pasha until today, Egypt always claimed that this is an existential threat. Any irrigation projects, any great dams for Egypt is an existential threat and also a security threat. There are actually two important reasons the Ethiopia and Egypt clash over the construction of the dam. The first one is filling the dam. Ethiopia wants to fill the dam in maximum 3 years, while the Egypt demands 7 or more years. This is one of the clashing points. The second one is the leaving amount. Ethiopia wants to leave from the waters of the Nile about 35 billion cubic meters in a year, while Egypt demands 40 billion cubic meters in a year. These are two important clashing points. When it comes to the diplomacy and dialogue, I choose this title because during the Hüsnü Mübarek era, Hüsnü Mübarek always disregarded the Ethiopian rights over the river Nile, and also during the early days of the Mohamed Mursi era, he was also criticizing the Ethiopians, and he said that if any drop of Nile water decrease, our blood is filling the gap. This means actually war threat against Ethiopia. And also there were some, when it comes to Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Sisi chooses the diplomacy way, but this diplomacy is not trying to solving the problem. It's just working for the complication for Egyptian perspective. The first diplomatic action is the international panel of experts. Each Minister of Water Affairs convened in the panel, and also the 4 international experts come together and discuss the issue. And then there is another important diplomacy activity, is the called Declaration of Principles in 2015. Although this declaration was signed, although it seems it's a good step for the solution of the problem, it didn't work due to several reasons. And as I said, Egypt always trying to complicate the issue. When it comes to the conclusion, I want to talk about some great projects that will be produced by Ethiopia. For example, the projects with starting in 2020, 2030, there were several projects will Ethiopia planning to produce. For this reason, the GERD is the starting point for this crisis, and in one way or another, Egypt has to agree over several issues in order to get the benefit of the GERD and other great dams that will be produced by Ethiopia. Thank you, Hocam. My presentation is all.
Thank you, Hasan, for your clarification on the technical issues that are going on between Egypt and Ethiopia and their impacts on the political relations between those countries. So you also gave some more details on the changing or different approach of the Egyptian leaders. So thank you for again your detailed presentation and the information you presented. So normally he will be our first speaker, but because of frequent technical issues we face in generally such, remote or distance conferences, or internet sometimes bring us such technical problems. So let's listen our latest and another important speaker, Nigusu, who will be also focusing on dam related, let's define it like that, dam related issues between Ethiopia and Egypt, but he will be focusing on more military problems between those two countries. Let's give him our ears then, please. Please open your microphone firstly, Nigusu, and then kindly start your presentation if you feel ready, of course. Okay, you can start.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank for the organizer of the conference. In addition, I would like to thank my supervisor, Professor Turgut Subashi, who initiated me to participate in this conference. Apparently, or in addition, I would like to thank Professor Ismail, who coordinated this presentation or this panel. In addition, I would like to thank all participants of the panel. My topic is Ethiopia-Egypt arms race, a pitfall on the regional water diplomacy. All along the past decades, there was headstrong diplomatic relationship between Ethiopia and Egypt. The presence of this headstrong diplomatic relationship between these northeastern countries hindered the possibility of cooperation and lies the ground for animosity and hostility between Ethiopia and Egypt. Ethiopia is a country which contributes around 86% of the Nile water, but unfortunately Ethiopia is one of the countries among those eastern riparian Nile Basin countries that benefited very little from the Nile water. Egypt, which contributes almost 0% of the Nile water, protected Ethiopia and those upper riparian countries from constructing any kinds of projects along the Nile River. On the process of, on the development of such circumstances, Ethiopia and those upper riparian countries time and again try to lobby Egypt, try to approach Egypt in order to ensure equitable and reasonable water sharing from the Nile River. But rather than approaching the proposal of Ethiopia and those upper riparian countries in more progressive and reasonable manner, the Egyptian used to employ military conspiracy, political plots, economic frame-up in order to hinder the project or any kind of project along the Nile River. All along this development, the fact on the ground began to change in 2011, and in 2011, Ethiopia surprisingly launched the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And the official start of the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam complicated the existing problem between Ethiopia and Egypt. And after the official start of the grant or the GERD along the Blue Nile, which is called Abay in Ethiopia, Egypt began or Egypt started an all-inclusive diplomatic campaign globally. But not only diplomatic campaign. In addition, the Egyptian began to plot, or Egyptian political elite began to plot in order to hinder the projects on the Blue Nile. A typical example for these plots can be taken as, for instance, in 2030, the Egyptian political elite, including the then president of Egypt, caught in a live TV program while plotting how to attack the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and how to, destabilize Ethiopia in order to hinder the project along the Blue Nile. In addition, or on the other hand, while political elites, scholars, news outlets illustrate about or explain about the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, here is one misconception, because Egypt and political elites in Egypt and news outlets used to associate the official start of the Great Renaissance Dam with the Arab Spring. This is completely wrong, because, but here I want to ask, for instance, in September 2019, President Al-Sisi argued that dam on the Nile would never been built was it not for the impact of the 2011 uprising or the Arab Spring. Here we have to ask why this issue is magnified. What was the reason that the Egyptian associated the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam construction with the Arab Spring? Here are the two main reasons, even if it is not for this reason that Ethiopia was started the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam along the Blue Nile in 2011. The Egyptians tried to associate the construction of or the start of the dam with this issue. And the reason that instigated or that motivated or that instigated Egypt to associate the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam with the 2011 uprising was two. The first was in order to conceptualize or the conceptualization of superior subordinate duality between Ethiopia and Egypt, and to maintain the hegemonic position of Egypt on the Nile, in particular in Northeast African region at large. This is a hegemonic interest or superior subordinate duality interest is one of the reasons that instigated Egypt to associate the start of the Great Renaissance Dam along the Blue Nile with issue of Arab Spring. The second reason is such kind of conceptualization is largely charged simply because of the construction of Ethiopia as inferior other against the superior Egypt on the issue of Nile. Therefore, in this panel, this paper primarily, or in this panel, I try to make an issue, the following major question: why the hegemonic position of Egypt over the Nile is challenged by Ethiopia in 2010s. As I have mentioned, it's not the Arab Spring that enabled Ethiopia to challenge the superior position of Egypt over the Nile. There are other reasons which I will mention later. Given the hegemonic position of Egypt over the Nile, how the discursive, diplomatic, and legal games helped Ethiopia to challenge Egypt's superior position over the Nile, and how this issue leads to arms race between Ethiopia and Egypt is the other concept which I am going to discuss on this panel or on this paper. The third question is how the situation leads to arms race between Ethiopia and Egypt. As you see here on this picture, these are some of the countries which the Nile River crosses. It is one of the longest rivers in the world, and it crosses around 11 countries. And in order to present, a general answer for the above stated questions, this paper has three major sections. The first section of the paper will try to address about the foundation and possible links to the 2010 crisis between Ethiopia and Egypt. The second section elucidate or explain about the possible reasons that enable Ethiopia to challenge the superior position or the veto title of Egypt over the Nile. The other is, the last section is, will explain about the arms race between these two countries. When we come to the foundation linked to the crisis, the crisis used to associate it, or one of the problems for the escalation of the crisis between Ethiopia and Egypt is both countries associated the issue of Nile with national security and survival. the noise of national security, the noise of survival is, raised in an exaggerated manner. I understand like this. For instance, on June 2020 Security Council virtual meeting, the foreign minister of Egypt, Sami Shukri, stated the following, associating the issue of Nile with the issue of security, with the issue of existence and survival. On a similar language, on the same meeting, the Ethiopia's representative during the time, Ambassador Hayat responded to the claim or the argument of Sami Shukri in the same language, associating the issue of Nile with the issue of existence, with the issue of security and survival. Here, it is very important to underline that water is important for survival. Nile is important for both Ethiopia and Egypt. But it is manageable. The crisis can be managed peacefully in a cooperated manner through sharing idea. But here, the noise of existence or existential issue is exaggerated, or the noise is very, the voice is very high. For instance, if you take the issue of, by the way, the issue of existential issue is much more high on the side of Egypt. It's not only on the side of Egypt. The issue of Nile is important, not only for Egypt, but also for the remaining 10 countries of the Nile River Basin or Nile River Basin countries. For instance, if we take the case of Ethiopia, the Blue Nile drainage basin in Ethiopia covers around 70 or 68 to 70% of the surface water coverage of Ethiopia. How could Ethiopia can develop without using, 67 to 70% of its surface water? It is very difficult. It is very hard. If you take Ethiopia, around from 65 to 70 million people of Ethiopia are living in a darkness. Without getting electricity. How could a country can develop without using this? And the Blue Nile has a great potential for electricity as well as for irrigation. Again, 2/3 of Ethiopia's irrigable land is found along the Blue Nile. So without using this, it is very difficult for Ethiopia to survive. So survival issue is not only an issue in Egypt, but also for Ethiopia. Therefore, the only solution is, rather than exaggerating the issue of survival, these countries should cooperate, because the issue of Nile is the issue of survival for both Ethiopia, Egypt, Sudan, and the remaining Nile riparian countries. So one of the cause for the complication which leads to the arms race is an exaggeration of the issue of survival, which hinders the cooperation among Nile riparian countries. The other point is Ethiopia several times tried to challenge Egypt's cycle of hegemony over the Nile, but until 2011, Ethiopia's attempt was not as such fruitful. So here are the three possible reasons that enabled Ethiopia to challenge. What happened in the 2000s that enabled Ethiopia to challenge Egypt's cycle of veto title or hegemonic position over the Nile? Rather than the Arab Spring, here are the three major reasons that enabled Ethiopia to challenge Egypt's veto title over the Nile River. The first is the relative peace and political stability in the country in 2000s helped Ethiopia to challenge successfully.
Nigusu, please
Yes.
kindly, finalize your presentation.
Okay. The second is consecutive double-digit economic growth is the other issue. The third possible reason is, progressive and leader of Ethiopia. The other is in post-90s, Ethiopia challenged toward the superior position of Egypt over the Nile River has three phases. The first phase is, the initiation of or the establishment of Nile Basin Initiative helped Ethiopia to challenge successfully Egypt's position. The second the second phase of Ethiopia's challenge come after the cooperative framework agreement in 2010. And the third is declaration of principle, particularly Article 4, paragraph 1 of Declaration of Principles has its own significance to challenge Egypt's superior position over the Nile by Ethiopia. When we come to the course of arms race, the growing challenge from Ethiopia forced Egypt to Ethiopia and Egypt into arms race. This arms race has three major, potential reasons. The first is, exaggerating the issue of existence in pride is one of the issue. The second point which leads this two countries into arms race is, overshadowed the diplomatic solution of complication between two countries stem from the lack of trust. Lack of trust is the other problem between these two countries, which leads to arms race. The third point is historic right. Egypt used to raise the issue of historic right, which associated with the colonial issue. Egypt used to use colonial cards in order to dominate upper riparian countries. For instance, if we look at the 1959 agreement, which bestowed or which gives around 55.5% of 55.5% of the Nile water for Cairo and 80.5% of the Nile water to Khartoum, 10% for evaporation, which is equivalent to 84 billion cubic meter water, which is equivalent with the annual flow of the Nile water, which did not give, a single amount of water for upper riparian countries, including Ethiopia. So this issue complicated the problem between these three countries in particular and the remaining Nile riparian countries at large, and leads the country into complication and into an arms race. That's all what I have in relation to this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigusu. So Nigusu also analyzed the, dam project that constitutes the basic problems between Ethiopia and Egypt, and defined it as a main challenge to superior position of the Egypt in this region. So he actually proposed a different approach, and they tried to situate his speech the superior and subordinate relations, and he analyzed the project as a main factor that has potential to change such a kind of relation between Egypt and Ethiopia. Thanks again, Nigusu, for your presentation. So without delay, I need to direct our questions to our panelists. Let's start with our first question that is related to Hasan's presentation. So you see the question. If you answer the question, the question is like that. First of all, he thanks for Hasan's presentation, and he wonders how will current civil war, probably in Ethiopia, influence or will have a certain influence on the multi-struggle on Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Please, Hasan.
Thank you for the question. First of all, as I said before, and also Mr. Nigusu talked about the Declaration of Principles. In the Declaration of Principles, the 9th article say that all the respectful countries would be respect for their territorial integrity and not to support the other actors within the countries. For example, for this reason, Ethiopia demanded this article in the basin because Ethiopia claimed that such groups in Ethiopia was supported by Egypt. And also related to the question, actually, how the current civil war affect the multi-struggle on GERD is related to Egyptian position, and Egyptian choose actually how to say, Egypt is trying to demolish the Ethiopian Renaissance dam, and my suggestion is that Egypt should cooperate with Ethiopia in order to gain more benefit from the GERD, because GERD is not only beneficial for the Ethiopian, is also beneficial for Sudan and Egypt. Let's go.
Thank you for your clarification. So I think we finished our duration.
So there are a question for me.
There is another question for Zoulikha, I think.
How we can evaluate?
Sorry?
There are a question I want to answer on it.
Okay.
Yes.
Please go on.
Okay. How we can evaluate the outcomes of political action until constitution recommendation in this month? My answer is when the Hirak took place in Algeria, he didn't wait any reaction from any political parties because the Hirak want to remove them and to give the chance for young. This is my answer.
Okay, thank you, Zoulikha. You want to add anything, dear Rim?
No.
Okay. Okay. Is there any question?
I think there was those two questions on the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay then. Thanks for these, good panel and your contributions on this panel. I am very glad to host all of you, such a distinguished panelists in this session. So, inshallah, we'll see again in different sessions and different panels. Okay, thanks everyone. Again, thank you for participation and the questions. See you.
See you, Professor.